In this video, we are going to talk about the new functionality we introduced in Informix Enterprise Replication as part of our Informix major release 1410xe1. This new command, CDR migrate server, the main goal here is that we would like to make your job easy. If you want to migrate data from one server to another server, we would like to make your job as easy as possible. The goal of this command is that it will, you should be able to, with minimal steps required, we should be able to migrate data from one server to another server. And let's look at the use cases. So some of the use cases of the CDR migrate server command is that, let's say you want to set up the disaster recovery server in the cloud, and you want to replicate the data from your on-prem server to the cloud server, and you want to set up the replication. Of course, you can use the enterprise replication existing commands, but we would like to make that job as easy as possible for you. And the use cases are, if you want to migrate the operating system platform, let's say if you want to migrate from Solaris to Linux, or AX to Linux, or if you want to migrate from your 32-bit platform to the 64-bit platform, and or if you want to migrate from one major version of Informix to the next major version with minimal downtime to your applications. Right? And also you can use it like yet another enterprise replication command to simplify setting up of enterprise replication between one or more servers. So how does it work? It's based on enterprise replication. It is implemented as a macro on top of other Informix server commands and replication commands. And the way we approach this command is that it's a multi-phase approach. While migration of the data has multiple phases, and so so you have to migrate the schema, you have to migrate the data, and you have to set up the continuous replication between servers. So we divided this into multiple phases, and the good part is that these phases are restartable. You can execute all the phases, or you can say that I want to execute phase 1 and 2 and do something, then come back and execute the remaining phases. Now let's say if some phase fails, and if you rerun the command again, the CDR migrate server command verifies that if the command is already done, then it will skip the command. So that's a good part, right? So you don't have to worry about which phases are done and which phases are not done. So if you simply rerun the command, it will know and skip the command that are already completed. And there are some requirements before you run the CDR migrate server. You need to first set up the storage pool at the source and target servers. The reason we need storage pool is to recreate the storage spaces required for the schema at the target server, and also the storage spaces required for enterprise replication queues. So we need a DB space and SB space for the ER enterprise replication to be defined. And also for now you have to manually update this equalhost file to include the group name and group ID required for enterprise replication. And the other step is that you need to set up the trusted host, establish the trust between source and target servers. This you can do either through operating system provided trusting configuration, or you can use the Informix provided trusting configuration. But for now, these phases you'll have to do manually. And so the next question is, what version do we support from the source, and what version do we support on the target side? So for testing, we did test from 1170 FC1 and later versions, and the target we tested with 1410. It may work with other target nodes, older target nodes, but our testing, we did test between up to all the way from 1170 XE1 to 1210 and 1410 servers. We did discuss about restartability and the different phases it supports. So right now we do, this command has 6 phases. The first phase is we define the server, enterprise replication server between source and target. Then the command, then there's the next phase, add ER key phase. This phase will look at the source server database schema and see if there are any tables which requires doesn't have a unique key or primary key. One of the requirement to set up a replication between two servers is that, especially the enterprise replication, is that you need to uniquely identify a row. So for that, we require that the table needs to have either primary key, unique index, or ER key. So it will look for the tables that doesn't have primary key or unique index and generate commands to add ER key for those tables. And the next phase is it will look at the table definitions and database definitions to see what are the storage spaces we need on the target side. And then the fourth phase, we replay the schema. We do schema dump on the source and we replay the schema at the target. And the fifth phase, we create the required all the replicate definitions needed for ER. In the sixth phase, we do parallel synchronization operation to synchronize the data between source and target. Like I said, all these phases can be executed individually, or user can execute all of them together. And this is the syntax of the command. If you look, the minimum thing that user needs to specify the source server name, target server name, and phase that you want to execute. And these are the supported phases, right? 6 phases that we discussed. So either user specify all, that means we execute all the phases, or users can specify uh, any specific phase name here. But we recommend that you execute these phases in the same order. For example, you cannot create replicates without defining ER. So if you try to do phase 5 without phase 1, it will comply. And the other good part is that when you run this command, by default, we don't execute anything, either at the source or target. We print the commands to the standard out and in a script format. So we will generate a script for you. So the advantage with this approach is that you can see what commands required to set up the do the data migration from one server to another server. So you can look at the commands, you can execute them manually one by one, or modify the scripts based on your needs and execute the script, or you can optionally specify the exec option so that CDR migrate server will internally execute all those commands for you. And these are the examples. To print commands to standard out, you can specify CDR migrate server, source, target server name, source server 1, target server name is server 2, phase. I want to evaluate all the phases and print commands for all the phases. And if you want to execute the same command, now you specify the exec option, that then the command will execute all the commands. And if you want to run a specific phase, for example, you want to run just the define server phase, and you can specify the define server phase. And let's take a look at the demo. So I have two Docker containers here. I'm calling them source and target. Let me log into those containers. My left side window is the source and my right side window is the target. Do we have server up and running? So on the source side, I do have the 1210 FC6. On the target, I'm running 1410 FC1. Now we did discuss about what are the requirements before we run the CDR migrate server command. So SQL host needs to be set up with the group information, group name, group ID, and specify the group information required for the ER. And we have to do this at both source and target servers, and also configure the trust between two hosts. So I'm using the Informix provided trust environment, trust configuration. So the another requirement is that we need to create a storage pool at source and target servers. So I do have the storage pool at the source, and let's verify the target. Okay. So we do have the storage pool. Now I'm going to run this app.sh. Basically it's going to create two DB spaces, and DB space 1 and 2, and I'm going to run a stores demo database in DB space 2, and I'm going to create a test database and put table 1 in DB space 1, and we have the table 2, table 3. Some of them as primary key, some of them as ER key, and some of them as no key at all. If you have the table with already CR calls defined, then we try to set up the update anywhere configuration using the timestamp config tool so that you can update any data from both servers. If you don't have it, we use always apply config tool. Okay. So I'm installing the schema, and now you can see that we have the two new DB spaces. So we have stores database and test DB. Our target is empty right now. Right? Nothing. All 5 of them are system databases. Now we are ready to run the CDR migrate server. So we have to obviously run the migrate command from the 1410 server, because that's where we introduced our the option, new option. So this is the syntax. Now I'm going to specify minus source, and I'm calling the source name as the source simply, and target. My target name is simply the target, and phase. I'll use the all, and I won't specify any exec option. If I don't specify a database name, that we assume that you want to migrate data for all the databases, and I can optionally specify a file. If I specify a file name, it will not only print the commands standard out, but it will copy those commands to this file we specify here. Okay. So these are the commands, and let's open this file and look at all the commands. Like I said, the first phase is the configuring the and defining the ER. So these are the commands. We update the QMEM to 256 MB, and we define ER here. These are the two commands to define ER at source and target server. And the next phase is scanning the source database schema and look for the tables that requires ER key. These are the tables that doesn't have either primary key or unique index. So now we can take a look at the source database has 4 tables that require ER key to be added, and TestDB has 1 table that requires ER key. So the important note here is that uh, adding ER key is a slow alter. So that means when you alter the table, the exclusive lock is placed on the table, and since it's a slow alter, depending on the size of the table, it could take either few minutes to few hours. So this is the only phase you may need downtime to the applications. Rest remaining phases can be done while applications are actively connected at both source or target servers. So that's the ER key, adding ER key. Then we use the DB schema, some new options to dump the schema from the source, and then we also look at the schema to see what storage spaces we need for the source database, and we examined that we need DBA space 2 for the source demo database. We also try to keep the first and next extent size similar to what was on the source. And also we say we create the database, and then we use the DB import. Basically we only execute the schema here. We are really not importing any data. We do the similar work for the test DB as well. Test DB requires DBS1, and we execute the schema. Now we completed the schema part. Now it's time to define the replicates, replicate definition between all the tables at source and target servers. And these are the commands to define replication. By default, we create a replicate set for each database. We also create a grid, and we create individual replicates and add those replicates to all the replicate sets. And these are you can see that we are trying to simplify all those things that you need to do. Need to run these commands to define ER replication between 2 tables. And at the end, this is the sync phase. By default, we run the sync on a replicate set. Like you said, there is a replicate set for each database, and we try to run those jobs in parallel. So we try to, by default, execute 2 jobs at a time. And of course, you can specify more parallelism. Now, since the data is solid in script format, either you can run this as a script, or you run individual commands, or we can run the exec phase, exec option. It will run everything for you. Or you can instead of specifying all, you can also specify individual phase, like say define ER phase. It's going to just print those commands required to define ER define server between two servers. Okay. Now let's execute all these commands using exec option. It's going to run all the commands for us, and at the end we have the source and target data servers in sync. So we migrate the data, and we have a continuous replication defined. Right now we are defining the ER, so we are trying to create the storage spaces required for ER. We executed all the alters. Now we are importing the schema. We executed all the commands. Now we are synchronizing the data. Right? We are done. So now data is already in sync. Right? Now we can verify. For example, I can use the sync data, and I can use the check repair instead of initial synchronization. I can run those commands. Now you can see that I can verify the data that the data is in sync at source and target server. Now, since we completed all the phases, right? Now, if I just do execute define ER phase, right? Nothing going to happen because it command knows that you already defined ER and the servers are connected. So it knows that those commands are done. Then we don't have to rerun those commands. So hopefully, this makes the DBA job little bit easier to migrate data from one server to another server, or set up replication and set up the disaster recovery node in the cloud. The goal here is that to simplify the job as much as possible and also have minimal downtime while migrating the data. Okay. Thank you very much.